Hello. This video covers psychosocial development in infancy and toddlerhood. Specifically, we'll be talking about temperament and goodness of fit. We'll go over the development of emotions, uh, theory of attachment, the factors that influence the development of attachment, as well as Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. So children aren't born with full-blown personalities, but they do demonstrate differences in temperament soon after birth. So the term temperament refers to the innate characteristics of the infant, including their mood, activity level, and emotional reactivity. These are fairly consistent ways of relating to other people and situations, and they very much form the foundation of our personality. So temperament, very much the biological, genetically innate uh, default setting that we have, if you will. Um, our our personality will be shaped by it. It's built on that. And so our experiences and our foundation will influence how our personality eventually becomes. So temperament's innate, but our tendencies are also interpreted by others and later will give rise to personality traits that we view in ourselves. For example, a baby who is very predictable may be labeled as good, and this view may later be internalized into our self-concept. So this research was first done in 1956 by Alexander Thomas and Stella Chess, they initiated the New York longitudinal study to monitor differences in children over time. So they studied various dimensions of temperament, which are listed on the slide, things like activity level, rhythmicity, approach and withdrawal, for example. And they noticed that these dimensions tended to cluster together, yielding three general types of children. So the easy temperament style, which about 40% of infants were categorized as, were the infants who would quickly establish a regular routine of of eating, sleeping, and eliminating. They're generally cheerful and they adapt easily to new experiences. Difficult infants, on the other hand, which about 10% of infants fell into this category, are pretty irregular in their daily routine. So they don't easily get onto a schedule for eating, sleeping, and eliminating. They tend to react negatively and intensely to new experiences, and they cry frequently. Then they had the slow to warm up category, about 15% of infants in this category. So these babies are inactive, they have low-key reactions to environmental stimuli, they're generally negative in mood, and they adjust slowly to new experiences. The remaining 35% of their participants couldn't be consistently categorized. For example, they would usually have cheerful moods, but also react negatively to new experiences. So it's not a perfect system, but it gives us kind of a starting point. So knowing a child's temperament can be useful in dealing effectively with that child. Parenting styles that match infant temperament work very well and are known as having goodness of fit. So for example, with slow to warm up children, giving them advanced warnings about meeting new people is helpful, or having them only meet one new person at a time rather than a large group. So having goodness of fit in your parenting is recognizing the child's tendencies, but also encouraging adaptive behavior, like meeting new people. Of course, we need to meet new people. So not trying to, change them into a social butterfly, but to, yes, get them more used to meeting new people, something that they will regularly encounter. So it is also important to remember parenting is bidirectional, in that a fussy baby will typically evoke fewer positive reactions from parents who might feel less effective in their parenting role. Over time, they may become less patient and even punitive with their child. Although our temperament rarely changes dramatically as we age, we can learn to manage and work around certain aspects of it. And in this way, our temperaments are only part of our personality, our full pattern of feeling, thinking, and behaving. Self-regulation, self-concept, motivation, values, goals, coping styles, and sense of responsibility are all part of our personalities as well. And experiences with close relationships with others will also impact this over time. So again, both nature and nurture influencing our personality. For emotions, newborns will demonstrate several emotional states. One of the first is the basic attraction and withdrawal. They'll respond in order to get closer to people or situations, or they might move away from situations they don't like. Social smiling is when a child gives a broad grin evoked by interactions with their caregivers. They become capable of this around 2 months of age. Infants can laugh at 3 to 5 months of age, and they demonstrate fear, anger, and sadness somewhere between 6 and 8 months. Anger typically results from being prevented from obtaining a goal. So if you move something they want out of their reach, we'll see that anger. Sadness is usually due to being deprived of a caregiver. Fear is often demonstrated when a stranger is present, and this is often referred to as stranger wariness, or when a significant person leaves, separation anxiety, which also can be tied to sadness as well. So both stranger wariness and separation anxiety occur after a child has developed object permanence. So it doesn't seem to necessarily mean that they, think the caregiver's never returning, right? They understand that they're returning, but they're upset that they are currently gone. And some research has also indicated that infants experience jealousy around 6 months of age. So the basic emotions listed things like happiness, interest, surprise, fear, anger, sadness, and disgust. If I can say it right. These are the universal emotions, the basic emotions, meaning they are universal in humans as well as primates, and are genetically based, and are thought to be that way because they help to promote survival. These emotions appear first. Again, they are universally recognized through facial expressions cross-culturally. So a smile is a smile is a smile when it means happiness, right? Across cultures. We even people who are blind at birth will smile when they're happy, even though they've never seen a smile. So it very much seems to be rooted in our actual DNA. The other emotions, the self-conscious emotions, envy, pride, shame, guilt, doubt, and embarrassment, these appear later because they require children to develop a sense of self, so have that awareness that they're a person that can act on the environment. And then they also need to receive social instruction on when they should feel these emotions. So those develop a little later. Social referencing. This is the process whereby infants seek out information from others, typically trusted adults, to clarify a situation and then use that information to act. Toddlers will make use of facial expressions and other signals to evaluate the safety and security of their surroundings and then guide their own actions. So a great example of this, one of my friends and her children, we were by a river, and her little girl had a frog jump on her, and Mia, the little girl, she just kind of put her arms straight out. And she just stood there looking like, what do I do? And her mom said, oh, Mia, a frog jumped on you. All casual, calm, right? And then Mia was like, yeah, he jumped on me. She was acting like she was like almost proud of it. She definitely seemed happy about it. She spent the rest of the afternoon trying to catch some more frogs. Right. So when, when young children are not sure how to react, they're going to look to someone they trust for those cues. If her mom had instead said, "Oh God, get it off," right? Then she would have responded with fear. The message would have been, "This isn't safe. This isn't okay." And in fact, sometimes adults do teach their fears to their children through this process. We also have emotional self-regulation, which refers to the strategies that we use to control our emotional states so that we can still attain our goals. So at birth, infants have very little ability to change their emotional state, and caregivers are really a big help in terms of helping to soothe them or to distract them when they're feeling distressed. As their prefrontal cortex continues to develop, however, infants can tolerate more stimuli and they can shift their attention away from upsetting things around 4 to 6 months of age. As their motor and language skills develop, they're able to move away from situations and to communicate their need for help. Temperament definitely plays a role in emotional self-regulation as well. Self-awareness or self-recognition, typically this is seen between 15 and 24 months of age. This is the realization that you are separate from others, you're your own being, and you're able to act on the environment. You're able to recognize yourself in a mirror or in a photograph. Lewis and Brooks tested when infants develop self-awareness using the Rouge test. And the Rouge test, essentially, they'd use a little bit of rouge, reddish makeup, and they'd sneakily, put a little on their finger and boop the infant's nose so that they had a little red smudge on their nose. And then they would place the infant in front of a mirror. If the infant tried to rub the red dot off the baby in the mirror's nose, then then we'd know they didn't have self-awareness. If they reach up to rub the red dot off of their nose, then they're showing that they realize, oh, that's me in the mirror. I've got a red dot in my nose. How did that happen? Let's rub it off. Right? So after a child has self-awareness, they can start to understand those self-conscious emotions, guilt, shame, sympathy, empathy, things like that. Attachment. So attachment refers to the close bond with a caregiver from which the infant derives a sense of security. And a lot of research has focused on attachment and its implications throughout our lives. So let's talk about its beginnings. Freud's psychoanalytic theory. So Freud hypothesized that infants are in the oral stage of psychosexual development, meaning that they receive pleasure through oral stimulation. So through feeding, through putting things in their mouth, which, I mean, if you've ever been around babies, they stick everything in their mouth. So yeah, it kind of makes sense where he was getting that from. He believed that infants attach to their mothers because they are providing food. So their mothers are meeting the infant's oral needs through feeding. Renee Spitz's research, on the other hand, noted that infants in foundling homes, so homes for children who had been abandoned, they were given plenty of food, but not much touch and attention. So he noticed that they developed what he termed anaclitic depression or leaning on depression. And they would die at high rates, even though they had food. His hypothesis was that, or his belief was that they were needing that contact with others. And because they weren't getting that touch, that contact, that interaction, that is why they were dying. Suggesting that food's not the only thing that's important to our development. So the Harlows, Harry and Margaret, essentially decided to pit Freud's and Spitz's views against each other to really determine whether attachment is due to feeding or to contact comfort. And the way they conducted this study, they used infant monkeys, and they constructed these surrogate mothers. So these little fake monkey mothers. They were both about the same size. They were both heated to provide warmth. One of them was wrapped with a terry cloth towel, and that was referred to as the cloth mother. The other was made of wire and was named the wire mother. And both of the surrogate mothers had a space for a bottle to be attached. So all of the infant monkeys had these surrogate mothers, a cloth and a wire mother in their enclosure with them, in their cages with them. And so what the dependent variable was, the independent variable being which of the mothers had the bottle attached for feeding. Was it the cloth or the wire? The dependent variable, what was being measured, how long the monkeys spent in contact with the different surrogates, with either the cloth mother and with the wire mother. Half of them, the food was attached to the cloth mother. The other half, the bottle was attached to the wire mother. Across the board, the monkeys all spent more time with the cloth mothers, regardless of which had the food. So this seemed to confirm Spitz's research that they were indeed seeking contact comfort from having contact with another. Related to this, related to the development of attachment theory is also Konrad Lorenz's work on imprinting. So he was an ethologist studying the behavior of animals, and particularly he studied the several bird species where they imprint. So imprinting where after hatching whatever large moving object a baby duck or goose, for example, sees, they will follow it. And the idea, according to Lorenz, is that this is evolutionarily advantageous in that it ensures that the offspring will be protected from predators, will receive food, and will learn all the behaviors they need to know by following around their, mama goose or mama duck or whoever. So today, the ethological theory of attachment, which recognizes the infant's emotional tie to the caregiver as an evolved response that promotes our survival, is the most widely accepted view. So John Bowlby applied Lorenz's view, first to apply this view to the human-infant caregiver bond. So he said that, we can't follow the first large moving object or being that we see, of course, because we can't move ourselves yet. But rather we have these built-in behaviors that help to keep caregivers nearby and to protect the infant from danger. So his idea that the attachment bond best understood in an evolutionary context in which survival of the species is of utmost importance. So Bowlby said that attachment begins as a set of these innate signals that the baby uses to summon the caregiver, and then goes through 4 phases as it develops into a true affectionate bond. So the pre-attachment phase, birth to 6 weeks, built-in signals help bring newborn babies in close contact with other humans who comfort them. So things like crying, right, or cooing. Attachment in the making phase, 6 weeks to 6 to 8 months, is when infants respond differently to a familiar caregiver than to a stranger, and they begin to develop a sense of trust. And clear-cut attachment, this is 6 to 8 months to 18 months to 2 years. This is where babies display separation anxiety, becoming upset when a trusted caregiver leaves them alone. Formation of a reciprocal relationship, 18 months to 2 years and up, is where separation protest starts to decline as toddlers become able to predict a caregiver's return. So out of the early experiences, is that child learning that their caregiver is a secure base, someone they can turn to and expect to give them comfort and support, especially in times of distress. Bowlby said that these experiences become internalized. He referred to it as the internal working model, or a set of expectations about the availability of attachment figures and their likelihood of providing support during times of stress. And that this becomes a guide for all of our future close relationships. So not just our relationship with our parents when we're adults, but also for close friendships as well as romantic partners. Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory, very similar idea with Bowlby's theory in that children, the idea is, do children, if children receive sympathetic, loving care, they will develop a sense of trust, expecting the world to be a good and gratifying place. And so they feel confident about venturing out and exploring it, versus the negative possible outcome of this conflict, where they become mistrustful. They can't count on the kindness and compassion of others. And so the baby protects itself by withdrawing from people and the things around it. So Mary Ainsworth, one of Bowlby's students, developed a way to objectively measure the attachment bond between infants and caregivers, called the strange situation. And this was kind of based on another one of Harlow's studies, in which he would introduce this toy that would flash lights and make noise. It looked like a little robot, and it would, be a scary, strange thing that would upset the infant monkeys, and to see which of the surrogate mothers they would run to for comfort. So somewhat the same idea, except, not quite so scary. The strange situation technique, in which a child and the caregiver play in a laboratory setting with toys. A stranger comes in and tries to interact with the infant. The caregiver leaves the room, and we see how the child responds to the stranger when the caregiver's out of the room, and then the caregiver returns. And later they're looking at that reunion behavior when the caregiver returns. How does the infant respond, as being one of those big cues for attachment security. Then the stranger leaves, the mother leaves, the caregiver leaves, and then the stranger comes back in and tries to interact with the child again. And then the mother finally comes in, or the caregiver tries to come in, and then again seeing that second reunion. How does the infant react? And based on these reactions, several attachment styles were identified, 3 originally, and then a 4th was later added. Again, typically this is assessing children around 1 year of age. So with the secure attachment pattern, we typically will see infants using their caregiver as a secure base. So they will explore the play environment, they'll check in occasionally, When the caregiver leaves the room, they will cry, they will show distress, showing that separation anxiety from the caregiver. When the caregiver returns, they will actively seek comfort, and their crying is reduced immediately. They also will reject the stranger. They will seek out the caregiver if the caregiver is present in the room. They won't accept the stranger trying to comfort them when they're upset, right? And so this is what a secure attachment suggests. So this is thought to occur when a child has received appropriate, consistent care and affection from a parent. One of the rest are insecure types. So we have a couple different insecure patterns. The insecure avoidant pattern, where there's not attachment happening. The infants are typically not distressed by the caregiver's departure or not significantly distressed by it. They respond to the stranger in much the same way as they do to a caregiver. So not showing separation anxiety, not showing stranger wariness, and being unresponsive to the parent during the reunion. They're not seeking that contact. They're not seeking comfort. And the idea here is that this attachment pattern has resulted from the caregiver not responding to the infant, not meeting their needs. The insecure ambivalent or resistant pattern is where the infants will typically remain very close to the parent before the parent leaves, the caregiver leaves, kind of clingy type of behavior. They typically are distressed when the caregiver leaves, but when they return at that reunion, they display these angry, resistive behaviors. So they'll be crying, they're very hard to calm down. If they might struggle to be put down, even though they came over to get picked up. If a parent, a caregiver tries to distract them with a toy, they'll slap it away, things like that. And the idea here is that this pattern's developed because the caregiver wasn't consistently meeting the infant's needs. So sometimes those needs are being met, sometimes they're getting what they need, and sometimes not. The last one, disorganized, disoriented. These infants are very confused. They show contradictory behaviors. And this pattern is thought to reflect the greatest level of insecurity. They're not, playing with the toys. They're not responding to the caregiver typically, or sometimes they do, but they might hit them. They show very disorganized responses. And this is thought to maybe being due to the actions of the mother or the caregiver. Potentially this could be due to neglect or abuse. However, this can also be due to certain developmental disorders. So it's not always indicative of child maltreatment. So the factors that influence security of attachment, early availability of a consistent caregiver is huge. So responding promptly, appropriately to the infant's needs, holding them tenderly and carefully, responding to their emotional states, particularly the positive ones, avoiding overstimulation. Infants' characteristics play a role as well. So emotionally reactive and difficult temperament infants are more likely to develop insecure attachments compared to infants that have more resiliency, are able to overcome challenges and successfully adapt. Family circumstances. Stressful life changes can undermine attachment by interfering with parental sensitivity and affecting the infant's sense of security directly by altering the emotional climate or disrupting familiar daily routines. The caregiver's internal working models also plays a role. They're bringing their own history of attachment experiences from which they're constructing a relationship with their children. It's important to realize that early child rearing experiences do not destine individuals to become either sensitive or insensitive caregivers. It is merely one factor among many. So talking about back to Erikson, so the Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory kind of took the basic outlines of Freud's theory, but really built on it and really focused it more on those social interactions. Similar in that he did believe that we go through stages where we have to navigate a particular challenge. So we talked about trust versus mistrust as that very first psychosocial conflict that infants are faced. Do they develop a sense of basic trust that the world is safe, they're confident about exploring it, or do they develop mistrust where they now feel like they need to withdraw, they can't count on others being kind and compassionate. With his second conflict, the toddler conflict, autonomy versus shame and doubt, Erikson believed it would be favorably resolved if parents are able to provide young children with suitable guidance and reasonable choices. They're neither over nor under controlling. So the idea being that children are met with understanding when they make assertions about their independence, their autonomy, their choices. We don't criticize if they fail at a new skill they're trying out. If instead the child is being criticized or they don't get to make any choices, right? They don't have any control. They often will feel forced and shamed and not confident about their own ability to control their impulses, to do things okay. And so they'll develop that shame and doubt. So second year of life, they are learning to walk, to talk, to explore, giving, again, suitable guidance and reasonable choices so that toddlers can get practice making those independent choices is very helpful. Performing a task and seeing the end result can give a child that sense of pride in their accomplishments. And this self-evaluation is actually more effective than just having parents or someone else saying, "I'm so proud of you." Right? They'll feel proud of themselves because they've accomplished something tangible. Again, over-controlling or over-critical when toddlers are making those assertions of independence can lead them to feeling ashamed of their behavior and to really not trying much. They're too afraid. They have too much doubt in their own abilities. So this is not saying, let your kid eat ice cream when they say, "I want ice cream," right? For breakfast. This is saying, give them choices, reasonable choices. Like, well, no, we're not having ice cream, but you can have oatmeal or you can have scrambled eggs, right? And then they get to make some choice. They get to have some independence and build that autonomy without letting them, run wild. The Bailey scales. The Bailey scales of infant and toddler development is a way for psychologists to screen children for potential developmental delays so that intervention can occur early. Earlier intervention is always more effective than later intervention. So the Bailey scales used to measure development in infants between 1 and 42 months of age. They're evaluated on 5 different domains. So the cognitive scale, measures how a child thinks, reacts, and learns about the world. And there are different tasks depending on the age of the child. The language scale is broken into two subscales, so measuring receptive communication and expressive communication. Receptive communication, how well a child recognizes sounds and understands spoken words and directions. Expressive communication, how well the child communicates using sound, gestures, or words, again, appropriate to their age. The motor scale, a little out of order on the slide. The motor scale also broken into two subscales, measuring fine motor skills and gross motor skills. Remember those fine motor skills, using their hands and fingers to accomplish tasks. The gross motor skills, how well a child moves their body. The social, emotional, and adaptive behavior scales are measured by a questionnaire given to the caregiver. So the social emotional, looking at whether a child has met those major milestones for smiling, laughing, joint attention, things like that. Adaptive behavior, how well the child adapts to the demands of daily living, how they respond to new situations, similar situations, stressors, things of that nature. Again, helpful screening tool for checking if there are any potential delays, kids not hitting the expected milestones. And finally, the impact of COVID-19 on infancy and toddlerhood. Two big impacts for this age group. First, birth rates. Birth rates have been declining since 2007, but have decreased much more significantly when we compare birth rates in 2020 and in 2021. So most of the births in 2020, those births were conceived in 2019, right? Before the pandemic. The births in 2021, those would be conceived mostly during the pandemic in 2020. So again, steep decrease in births. And this occurred across almost all age and ethnic groups, and it's been recorded not only in the United States, but in other countries as well. And this has raised various concerns for the future of the economy, right? Because there will be fewer workers once they reach working age. The other big impact is on language development. At 8 months, infants watch our mouths to help match faces and voices, right? They're looking to make that connection with movement of the mouth to who is talking, where is that sound coming from? And while masks are important for disease prevention, they also cover these cues. And that may have especially impacted infants who are in childcare settings rather than cared for in their own or a relative's home, where masks are much less likely to be used. Even if infants were receiving care at home, many parents were working from home and so may not have been able to provide as much language exposure. Additionally, fewer interactions with others. This leads to a decrease in the number of language models that they're exposed to. So therefore, with all these considerations, it's thought that the pandemic may have negatively influenced some infants' language skills. Again, these are preliminary findings here, but definitely bears further research in the future. Thank you.